I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with four-time Emmy winner Sean Callery, composer on sci-fi action blockbuster Halo. Sean, you delivered like a really layered, muscular, propulsive score for Halo, and I think it really helps set the tone for what we're hoping we're going to get, which is a compelling space war saga. It kind of doesn't let up. Your score is right in the forefront from the moment the show opens. So I was wondering if that was your brief when you first signed on the project.
Well, hello. First of all, it's really great to meet you finally, and I love talking about the show. I mean, it's been a really amazing experience. I just finished the last one, which you'll see in about 3-4 weeks. To answer your question, yeah, there was a lot of discussion about tone and about how to bring an experience to people who know the gaming platform and the gaming experience really intimately, and also provide an opening or an access, if you will, to people who may or may not be as familiar with the richness of the story of Halo. So obviously the show and the gaming experience has a tremendous amount of beautiful, almost choreographed. The action is almost an aspect of choreography. It's so beautifully done. And we wanted to make sure that the music could be as immersive as you get from a gaming experience, and that's, I know that's a very hard thing to aspire for, because when I've played games, the interactiveness of the gameplay and the way the music morphs and adapts to the way you're playing the game is really quite a signature experience to that when you're participating. When you're working on a series in which it's locked picture and you're watching in a more passive way, you still want to be drawn into the story. And so that was the goal. And we tried various different things to try to bring that experience to be very organic and to make it very fun. We never wanted the show to be too just, even though there were very serious issues about war and humanity struggles and things of that nature, at the core of it, there's a bunch of beautiful characters in there. And when I was hired for the show, I made the case that the show is really about the characters. I mean, you have to connect with the characters as very fully. And I've always been guiding, my heart has always been guided by that. Having said that, the action and all the other things that surround it, which is a very important part of the story, was never far from my mind as well. So it was, and each episode is a different bottle of wine. You know, each one is a very different, unique kind of feeling and tone.
Yeah, to be honest, going into the show, I wasn't really sure what to expect. Obviously everybody knows what Halo is.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the greatest, the best in terms of that particular genre in gaming. So I was like, okay, what is this TV show going to be? Will it just be like, a carbon copy of that? And which is really boring. And it so isn't. It really isn't.
So heavy,
and I want to pick up on something that you just mentioned earlier. I'm going to jump to one of my later questions because I think it's really important for people to know that this is a very immersive show. And to me, that honored the spirit of the source material. Like a lot of that has to do with your score. There's some great synth elements that particularly that ongoing ambient soundscape that you've created that made me feel like I was in the game, but kind of like in reality. It was very meta for me. And I was just wondering how intentional that was. I mean, I guess it was because you've mentioned it, but talk us through more about, because that sets this apart from every other series in the genre.
Listen, I so appreciate that comment because that's really what I was aspiring for. I can speak to, for example, when we first visit High Charity, the massive, what I called the mushroom ship in the beginning. It was such a beautiful image, but that temple had this very solemn energy to it. And originally we weren't going to score that scene. And this is just one example of what I was trying to do, was because Halo is in so many different kinds of locations and planetary systems, and there are different aliens with different energies and so forth. we wanted to see if we could do anything to tweak the environments we were in, which is not to take anything away from the sound effects editors and the dialogue and all what they were doing. Because I was a sound effects editor 30 years ago on Deep Space Nine, and that's a whole other chapter in my life.
Wow.
But I have a tremendous amount of respect for sound design, and I did a lot of sound design when I was working as a sound effects editor. So when you get into ideas into places that feel sort of unsafe or strange, or places that feel safe, when you're in a room with friends, when you're in a room with friends, there might be little things that you can do in the background sonically that just sort of evoke maybe a bit of warmth or a little bit of unsafety, a little bit of uncertainty. And those are really the hardest. In some respects, they're sometimes the hardest cues to do, because if you overstep and you become if you overstep and try to overplay something, it can bring a self-consciousness to things and then take you out of the show. And so we really treasured those moments where we could really play with the energy of a space. And I'm very happy that that's how it worked out for you in terms of the connection to it, because that was the intention, so that when you really felt you were there. And at the same time, if you go so wall to wall that you can get the ear can get fatigued, you can get just tired. And so we had to. We worked so hard on that, and Microsoft and Amblin and Take Five and our director and showrunners. Those were the richest discussions we had. I wish there could be a documentary on just the Zoom spotting sessions, because they were quite intense. They were very, very intense in terms of tweaking story and experience and feeling and so forth.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I was really wondering about it, because every show has dramatic underscore, right? We're used to that, but this is different, and it wasn't like it could have been so bad if as you say, if it was overplayed. Mm-hmm. Somehow you guys, honestly, you really stuck the landing, because it was just right. And I noticed it, but I noticed it in a really good way, and it just made me want to get in there more. That mushroom thing, by the way, amazing.
Right? Oh God, I mean,
oh my God.
You got to also understand, is like for some of the later shows, I didn't see any of the final effects. I was looking at sort of half rendering.
Yeah.
So when I finally saw these things I saw the premiere a month ago, and I was like, oh my God, these guys were drinking a lot of coffee to get that done in time, because it was crazy. But there are other moments too. There's a moment coming up in the end of show 6, which is this week, in which I collaborated with another composer from Canada, Colin Stetson, in the last 5 minutes of the show. And I can't tell you what the moment is, but you'll know the moment, because it's an extraordinary moment in the story. And you go to a place for the very first time and experience this experience with people. And that was another place where the environment and the story and the actors and everyone were firing on all cylinders, and the sound and the music had to be really, they were like dancers in a way. They had to really cooperate together. And I have no problem, by the way, if sound effects tell the story better than music, or vice versa, so be it. That's one thing I learned, is just whatever tells the story best. And I've had some cues that got taken out because the effects just needed to be featured more. And you could be disappointed from a ego point of view, but from the story point of view, you're grateful that someone's got a more level head.
Yeah, I get. That's very good. See, that just shows your commitment to the narrative, and that's ultimately what you're all there for. And speaking of, I'm really glad. I mean, this was a no-brainer. This show's been in development for some time. It's got a built-in audience, and then you hopefully bring in new people who want to experience something a bit different. And that was me, because I never played the game. Mm. And I was immediately drawn to, look, let's speak of the most obvious part of the score for the pilot, for example. And that's like where you have that bloody ambush on Madrigal as the Covenant have decided to attack.
Yeah.
And that is so propulsive, and use a variety of instruments. And to me, it felt like you were aiming for... like there was a militaristic element to it, but it also came in waves. Like it crescendoed and went back down, and crescendoed and went back down, and I just felt like it was relentless, and it was also extremely effective. I'd love you to talk me through what you were going for that, because that's the moment where we're really in the story.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And that was actually the last thing that got shot, because the show, when I was hired in March of last year, that was 2021, they showed me a working version of that episode. And we came to that moment where Quan, fires a flare, and then it says Madrigal is attacked, and it was one just piece of it was an 8-second slug of just a placard, and then I didn't see anything, and then they come to the end of it when Quan is, I won't give it away, but she suffers a big loss, and then they filmed it in August of last year, July, and then I saw the first cut of it in September, right around Labor Day. And I will admit, I did one thing. This is why I'm so grateful for some of the show running and the observations of the people I worked for, and there were a lot of them. But I think if I were to use a car metaphor, I think I scored I scored the whole thing with the car revving at like 120 miles an hour on the way to Vegas. No stops. Because there's so much action, you're very inclined to want to just keep hitting that bullseye. And on 24, back in the day when I did that series, we'd have these really long action sequences, and you have to, like with any amazing moment in a story, they have an arc. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And in that battle scene, there's a lot of weaving and things that happened. And I guess in my defense a little bit, I was seeing a lot of rendered things that didn't quite speak to me visually. And they're like, look, you realize this is happening, and this character is going through this. And so I went through about 3 or 4 iterations of that scene to get it to flow right, so that when it arrived at certain moments, it felt somewhat earned and it didn't feel forced. That was a real concern, that I didn't want it to feel sort of like arbitrary. And it was, that was one of the I will say this is one of the hardest and most challenging projects I've ever worked on, because of those kinds of scenes. I've never worked on scenes that were that big. And show 9 is even crazier, and show 5 is crazy. So I appreciated the challenge very much. But yeah, I had to go over that quite a few times to find the spaces. Those gaps were extraordinarily important, especially like, for example, when the Master Chief first appears. Yeah. We had to, you can't just be running at triple forte and then he appears and then he lands. I mean, the music just has to work twice as hard to make his arrival happen. So we had to really sit with it. And the picture was also changing in editing and so forth. So finally, when we got the locked, or 90% locked, then we started to feel the edges of the picnic blanket, so to speak. And then we thankfully we got there. I will admit, I have the circles and a little bit of the hair length to prove the.
Oh man, sure. Am I right in stating that you're composing this right up to the last second? Like you only started composing or recording not that long ago, relatively speaking. Is that right?
Well, we recorded the first, and we wanted to keep on a budget, so we recorded the first and second episodes in September.
Right.
But we had to go back to show 1 because we didn't have the battle. And then we recorded them in pairs. But then when we got to show 5 in December, I got COVID right as I was spotting show 5, which was that was a little spooky, because my wife and I were supposed to be visiting family. Thank God we didn't go up there. I would have gotten everybody sick.
Yeah.
But but it was the shortest episode, show 5, but it was the largest episode in terms of action up until that point. So that took a little bit of taking a breath, but there's nothing you can do. I mean, you have to convalesce, and I had to work a little bit through it, but thankfully I didn't get like so laid up that I had to go to a hospital or anything like that. But yeah, we had our last live session 3 weeks ago for show 8 and 9. So yeah, and we're putting the fight. Actually, normally the music would be the last thing. In my shows, music is the last thing that gets put in, but there's still some wonderful effects being added to show 9, and I'm hoping people really like it. It's extraordinary.
I haven't seen 9. I'm looking forward to that. So, I mean, that's pretty typical for a composer. You're one of, in terms of all the artisans, below the line, so to speak, even though I believe they're all above the line and the stars are the not less important ones. You're one of the last people to kind of put your magic on the episode before it's locked and then it's aired. I mean, so you're used to this, But just generally speaking, as a composer, how difficult is that, or is that something that you prefer, where you're coming in at the end and adding your, the seasoning to the episode?
It's a great question. I mean, music is in my opinion, sort of the last stop where, I mean, I don't want to sound too flowery, but when we hear music of any kind, if you hear an old song that you went to high school with, you're taken right back there. We have such a connection as human beings to music, to its aesthetics and its emotion. So if anything wasn't quite met in the production process, as we're in the post-production process, the music has a profound opportunity to close the gap. Yeah. And every now and again, and this didn't happen on this show. Sometimes I'm working on episodes of something and someone will say, I did not like the performance of this actor. We did not get the right nuance in the tone. We're not conveying a certain point of the story. Could you help us here with the music? Those are interesting challenges because sometimes there's nothing, you have to sort of almost infuse a subtext into a situation with the music. That thankfully really didn't happen here. We sort of started arriving organically at the flow of the energy of the show. And the biggest example I can point to is probably the biggest discussion we had over the entire run was using the Halo theme from the game, where to put it, because it's so iconic and it's a brilliant theme. And they wanted new themes for the show. That was without a doubt, they wanted a new kind of tone and texture. But we also didn't want to, I felt we had to have a very solid and respectful and strong connection to where this show comes from. It just can't exist without it. So we were picking and choosing the moments regarding some of the themes from the game, and they had to be really arrived at. And again, I use the word earned. You just don't want to just sprinkle it on anywhere. It doesn't make sense, So for people who know the theme, it's kind of a neat Easter egg, so to speak, and for people who don't, it just functions as a part of the flowing of the score, you hope, so yeah.
Speaking of themes, so the opening credits, that is where the music takes center stage, and where people can sit back for a second and just understand, okay, sonically this is what the series is all about. That's not all the time, but generally that's how I feel about opening credits. I never skip them ever, because they're very important.
Man, good for you. That's good. Yeah, important. I do too.
This is a rousing militaristic anthem. Actually, it has hallmarks for me personally of like Basil Polidoris's legendary Starship Trooper score, which is like in my top 5 of all time. But it's obviously something very different. Can you talk us through did it turn out the way you wanted? Was that the outcome you wanted to see, and how hard was it to get to that point?
Main titles are a little bit, they're intimidating. When I heard main titles as a kid, before you could stop and rewind video cassettes, they were sort of the buffer of getting settled for watching the show. The Beverly Hillbillies or the Jetsons, or they're just great. And then when I did Jessica Jones, for example, for Marvel, that was a longer theme, and that was a delight to do. And you do want to sort of, you're right, it's a downbeat of sorts. It's sort of laying the sonic, putting a flag, so to speak. This is how we're going to lay out the show. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes there's a very different musical sound for the show that then goes into a different kind of color. But when I was inspired for that theme, I kept wanting to ask the producers about describing John, the Master Chief. I knew that he was evolving. I knew that part was told to me, and I must have 30 or 40 quick times of various iterations of what ended up being final. And one day someone said that he's a hero, he has loyalty, he's, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes someone offers a word that gives you a kernel of a riddle, a kernel of a clue as to how you want to go. And someone said, he's sort of reaching. He's reaching he's sort of reaching for some truth or something of that nature. And I always thought he's reaching for his origins, for his authentic self, which I think a lot of people have been doing the last 2 years going through COVID. You know, this is why I thought the story was so resonant, and why I think the game has been so resonant for the last 20 years. It's always speaking to the human experience and what we're going through at that particular time. It just sort of it survives and it goes on timelessly, so to speak. And so that reaching aspect, I started writing the theme before I saw the graphics. And then I saw the graphics, and then I got inspired by the more motion in the strings, and I wanted to just sort of keep reaching higher, almost beyond what he could grab. And I am happy with how it came out. They were happy. I mean, the approval process is very, you know, it can go either way. And luckily I was I was sort of in the right. They liked those themes early on, and then when I tried to put it into a main title, I was happy to be able to do so. But you'll hear that theme in more contemplative ways and in more evocative ways that I was hoping would serve the show, much like some of the greater themes of you know, in cinema do. You know, that you can play them in so many different kinds of emotional contexts, and they just flow like gangbusters. You know.
Oh yeah, I mean that's one of my favorite things about a score is that favorite cue, and particularly if you hear it in an opening credit. And revisiting it throughout, and that's what I'm looking forward to most when listening to this. My final question before we go, we've kind of run out of time, unfortunately, because I could literally talk.
And that went like so quick.
I know, right? My God, and I have so many more things to talk about. We'll have to make that in part 2 next time. So you've got 3 Emmys for 24, right? And I'm talking to you offline. I mean, when I think of the name Sean Callery, I immediately think about that score and the suite of music you wrote for that series is just phenomenal. 3 Emmys, no surprise. Then you won for the theme music for Jessica Jones, which you mentioned earlier. It's such a beautiful theme song. Love it so much. So like you're very much in the pocket of great you know, sci-fi, action, fantasy. So what was the highlight of all those Emmys? Have you got one in particular? Because like the first one's probably really awesome. The last one's like, wow, I've still got it. Like, where do you sit on all your Emmys that you won?
Man, it's such an interesting, wonderful question. You know, when I was nominated for the first year of 24, I did not receive it. I forgot a Blue Planet one, and that composer was so wonderful. And my father came out, you know, because I'd never been nominated for anything before. And I remember when I went to the airplane, I don't know why I apologized to him. I said, I'm sorry, you know, and he says, what are you kidding me? I'm going to start crying thinking about this, because you just feel like you owed, I don't know, you flew him out, let's celebrate. And I didn't know if it was going to happen, but I didn't expect that I would feel like I needed to apologize. And boy, he was like, would you please don't ever apologize to me for anything? He goes, you know, so it was a very sweet moment. Obviously the first time I received for 24, I was blown away, but you're making these points that are really interesting, which is that when you get older, and we're always, the moment we get involved with any other project, we're really eager to keep proving. We want to do our best. We want to keep going. We of course appreciate the recognition, so that when you get nominated, like when I got nominated for Jessica Jones, that was really special because it was not 24, you know, and 24 ran its course. I was very proud of 24, but it was nice to be nominated for something else. And then I don't think it ends. It's not like you're racing for awards. It's just that when you are acknowledged in any way, the older, and I will say that I have been doing this now for 25 years. So it is nice that that I've been able to keep working. It doesn't always happen, and you don't know when your ideas are done, or if you've got bad ideas, or ideas that are just ellipsing into areas that no longer serve the arenas that you were in prior. But Halo was sort of this extraordinary opportunity to bring almost everything I've learned up until now to the thing. I don't think this was something I could have done 5 years ago. I really don't. I don't think I would have had the mental discipline. I think there's some of this, there's a lot of emotion that, I'm just being honest, sometimes it's very challenging. But then when you deliver and people start enjoying the show, like your comments mean the world to me, really, honestly. I mean, they mean the world to me, not because they feel good to hear, but also because the things that when you were noticing the things that I was really trying to go for, and you're bringing them up and we didn't even discuss them, that's a real payoff. And I would imagine that's the same for a lot of my colleagues, but speaking only for myself, it's just wonderful. And anyway, I appreciate talking to you about it.
Yeah, I thank you. Yeah, look, when the work is that good, you know, it's so we could literally be here all day, but we won't. And on that note, thank you, Sean, for your time. Congratulations on Halo. It really exceeded my expectations. I'm so glad. And I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. I hope to see you soon when you come here, or I'll come there when, you know, I look forward to meeting you in person.